Avoidants don't start missing you because you sent the perfect last message, or because you finally found the exact words to explain your pain. They start missing you when the rhythm they relied on from you breaks. When your behavior stops being predictable in the ways that used to keep them feeling safe and in control. For so long, they knew your pattern better than they knew their own emotions. They knew that if they pulled back, you would step forward. If they grew cold, you would grow warmer. If they went silent, you would eventually fill the silence with your apologies, your check-ins, your "I just want to understand." And that predictability allowed them to avoid true vulnerability, because they never had to risk coming toward you wholeheartedly. They knew you'd always close the distance for both of you. Your chasing, your explaining, your emotional rescuing became the invisible safety net they took for granted. You would see their withdrawal and instinctively ask, "Are you okay?" You would feel their indifference and instinctively overperform love to prove your worth. You would sense them slipping and instinctively open your heart even wider to pull them back in. Every time they created distance, you rushed in to make it less scary, for them and for you. And while you were doing what you believed love required, their nervous system was quietly learning a dangerous lesson, that they could keep half showing up and still have the full benefit of your devotion, that they could disconnect and you would plug them back in, that they could avoid the discomfort of looking at their impact because your constant pursuit protected them from ever feeling the full weight of it. Avoidants are driven by fear. Fear of being trapped. Fear of being swallowed by someone else's emotions. Fear of losing themselves in intimacy. And your predictability, as painful as it was for you, allowed them to feel like they could keep their fear and still keep you. They knew you would rescue the connection whenever it started to fracture, so they never had to decide. Am I willing to step up? Am I willing to risk? Am I willing to show up differently? Your chasing meant they didn't have to. Your explaining meant they didn't have to reflect deeply. Your emotional labor meant they didn't have to learn how to do any of their own. They could sit on the sidelines of the relationship while you ran laps trying to keep love alive. The moment everything changes is not loud. It's actually incredibly quiet. It's the day you feel that familiar urge rising in your chest. The urge to send another long text after they ignore you. The urge to call until they answer. The urge to fix what you didn't break. And instead of obeying it like you always have, you pause, you breathe, and you make a different choice. Maybe you delete the paragraph you were about to send. Maybe you put your phone on the other side of the room. Maybe you cry into your pillow instead of into their inbox. But whatever the form, you stop doing what you've always done. You no longer volunteer to be the emotional savior of a dynamic that keeps wounding you. At first, they might not notice. Avoidants are used to people being upset, pulling back for a day or two, sending a salty story or vague quote, and then caving the moment they throw out the smallest breadcrumb. A hey, how are you? A memory. So when you go quiet, they tell themselves a familiar story. They're just mad, they'll come around, they always do. That story comforts them initially. It lets them stay detached a little longer. But as the hours turn into days and your pattern doesn't return, their body starts to register that something is off. There is no third follow-up from you, no "sorry if I was too much," no attempt to repair the thing they broke. They can feel the absence of your usual movement toward them. That is when missing you truly begins. Not because you stopped loving them, but because you stopped performing your love in ways that carried all the responsibility. Your silence feels different this time. It isn't a tactic. It isn't a test. It's a boundary. And their nervous system, which was used to expecting your energy on demand, now has to sit in a reality where you are not constantly available. The comfort of knowing they could have you whenever they wanted starts to dissolve. And in that dissolving, longing appears. They remember your messages, your softness, your way of checking in on the little things. They remember that you saw them more deeply than they allowed themselves to admit. And now that those things are no longer coming toward them automatically, they miss what they refused to truly receive when it was freely offered. Your unpredictability here is not about playing games. It is about finally choosing not to abandon yourself to keep the connection alive. And that is exactly what shakes them. Your behavior is no longer driven by their push and pull. It is driven by your self-respect. You do not rush to fix things when they have made no effort. You do not spill your heart out again to someone who has shown you they don't know how to hold it. You do not explain the same pain for the 10th time to a person who never changed after the first 9. Your lack of chasing forces them to see that the bridge they walked across so casually was one you built, maintained, and repaired alone. And now that you're no longer doing that work, the gap between you finally looks and feels like what it is. Avoidants start missing you in a real way when they no longer have the illusion of you as a permanent emotional backdrop. When your love stops being the wallpaper of their life and becomes something they can actually lose. The certainty that once kept them lazy gives way to uncertainty, and that uncertainty exposes their attachment. They are not as detached as they told themselves. They are not as indifferent as they acted. They were simply protected from feeling their own dependence on you as long as you kept moving toward them. When you stop chasing, explaining, and rescuing, you don't become less loving. You become less available for the version of love that hurt you. And that is the exact moment an avoidant starts to truly feel your absence, not as a concept, but as a lived reality. They finally taste the space they always claimed to want. And without your predictable pursuit filling it, they discover it doesn't taste like freedom. It tastes like loss. It tastes like the echo of everything you used to give that they assumed would always be there until the day it wasn't anymore. Your absence doesn't just mean you're not there to text or call anymore. It means the entire emotional ecosystem they were quietly feeding off has suddenly gone offline. And for the first time, they are left alone with the silence that you used to soften for them. Because you were never just a person in their life. You were an emotional home. A place where their rough edges were understood, their moods were decoded, their distance was excused, and their inconsistency was constantly cushioned by your empathy. When work was stressful, you were the one who said, "I believe in you." When they felt misunderstood by the world, you were the one who said, "I see you." When they shut down, you didn't just walk away, you leaned in. You tried to understand what had hurt them. You reassured them that you weren't going to suddenly turn on them like others did. And all of that emotional care became a kind of safety blanket they wrapped themselves in, even while they were only half present with you. They got to feel seen without fully stepping into being a partner who consistently saw you back. They got to feel supported without offering the same level of support in return. They got to feel chosen over and over while giving you a version of them that was guarded, fragmented, and often distracted. When you finally step out, when your energy is no longer flowing toward them out of habit, they don't just notice the lack of messages, they feel the absence of the role you played in their inner world. They realize that no one else checks in with the same depth. No one else remembers their triggers in the way you did. No one else hears the shift in their tone and asks, "Are you really okay?" instead of accepting the automatic, "I'm fine." And that recognition doesn't always arrive with dramatic clarity. It creeps in quietly, in moments that used to belong to you. When they accomplish something and instinctively reach for their phone, before remembering there is no "you would be so proud of me" message waiting to be sent. When they have a bad day and realize that the one person who gave them space to vent without judgment, who held their contradictions gently, is not standing on the other side of the screen anymore. Your absence throws their emotional dependence on you into sharp relief, because the things they dismissed as just how you are, your deep questions, your check-ins, your long messages, your frustration when they went missing, were all expressions of care. And without that care pouring in, there is a hollowness they can't easily explain away. They start to replay conversations where you tried to tell them you were hurting, moments when you said, "I feel like I'm giving more than I'm getting," or "I don't feel safe in this." And instead of meeting you there, they minimized it, reassured themselves that you were just emotional, and carried on enjoying the comfort of being loved more than they were willing to love back. But now, with your presence gone, those memories don't feel like drama. They feel like warnings they ignored. They remember the way your face fell when they canceled last minute, the way your energy dimmed over time, the way you slowly stopped sharing your inner world because it felt one-sided. All of it looks different through the lens of your absence, because now there is no new evidence of your love arriving to drown those uncomfortable truths out. Your absence forces them to sit in the raw reality that the emotional home they took for granted is not something they can access whenever they feel lonely. It is something that existed because you kept showing up with open hands and an open heart, and without your ongoing contribution, the house collapses. The warmth they used to feel when they thought about you is now mixed with a cold understanding that they did not take care of the place where they were nurtured. They did not maintain the connection that fed them. They lived inside your love like it was air, and never asked themselves what would happen if you stopped breathing for them. In the emptiness that follows, they feel the weight of how half-present they were, how they enjoyed your depth while offering you their surface, how they accepted your patience while resisting accountability. And that realization, even if they bury it under distractions at first, stays with them. Because no matter who they talk to, no matter who they date or flirt with, the quality of being truly seen and held that they had with you is not easily replicated. Your absence is not just a missing contact in their phone. It is the missing feeling of being emotionally anchored by someone who chose them wholeheartedly, even when they were only showing up halfway. When an avoidant finally starts to miss you, what's really haunting them is not just you as a person. It's the version of themselves they got to be in your presence. The version that felt special, adored, deeply seen, emotionally safe. Even though they never truly earned that level of devotion, because the truth is, you didn't just love them, you elevated them. You held them in a light they never learned to hold themselves in. You listened to stories no one else had patience for. You remembered tiny details they casually dropped. You celebrated their smallest wins as if they had climbed a mountain. You made their ordinary moments feel important. You made their soft spots feel sacred instead of shameful. And they built an identity inside your love without realizing it. They got to be the chosen one in your world, the name that made your face soften, the person who could text at any hour and know they would be received with warmth, even on your worst days. So when you finally step back, they're not just losing access to you, they're losing access to who they were allowed to be with you. With you, they could be emotionally clumsy, delayed, inconsistent, and yet still be treated like they were valuable. You made room for their fear, for their shutdowns, for their emotional confusion. You explained away their distance to yourself and others. They've been hurt. They're just scared. They're not bad. They just struggle. And while you were doing that to protect them, to keep your heart open, they were quietly benefiting from a story that put them at the center of something soft, forgiving, and loyal. They were allowed to be wounded without being abandoned. They were allowed to be flawed without being discarded. That experience is rare, and whether they admit it or not, it fed a deep part of them that has always felt unworthy, unseen, too much, or not enough. When you pull that away, when your eyes no longer light up when their name appears, when your messages are no longer long, safe spaces for them to unpack their chaos, when your presence is no longer guaranteed in their darkest moments, they suddenly feel smaller inside their own life. Not because you curse them or wish them harm, but because so much of their sense of being special was tied to the way you saw them. And now that mirror is gone, they have to face the reflection they've been avoiding, the one that doesn't look nearly as heroic or misunderstood without your commentary around it. They miss your reassurance that they're a good person. They miss your insistence that there is more to them than their patterns. They miss your belief that their heart is deeper than their behavior, because your belief softened the guilt they didn't want to feel. Your love helped them bypass true accountability. Every time they pulled away and you said, "I know you're scared, it's okay," they got to feel cared for and unchallenged. Every time they hurt you and you told them, "I understand, I know you don't mean to," they got to feel absolved without having to actually repair anything. That's a powerful position for an unhealed person to be in, and it became their emotional comfort zone. When that's gone, when your belief no longer covers their avoidance, they start to feel the harder truth underneath, that they were given this rare place in someone's heart and they did not honor it. They start to miss the feeling of being admired by someone who knew their wounds and still called them capable. They start to miss the role of being the one you waited for, rooted for, prayed for, because that role temporarily made them feel like the main character in a story they didn't even show up fully to write. And with you gone, they are just a person alone with their patterns, without the cushion of your love to make those patterns feel less damaging. They don't just miss your presence watching their favorite shows, your laugh, your inside jokes, the way you touched their hair. They miss the person they got to be through your eyes, the admired one, the misunderstood but worthy one, the "they just need time and healing" one. And that's why the missing can feel so intense for them once you're really gone. Because the loss is double. They're losing their emotional home and their favorite version of themselves at the same time. The painful part is that you handed them that experience before they had earned it. You loved them at a level they weren't prepared to reciprocate. You treated them like a king or queen while they were still acting like a runner. And that imbalance is exactly why it hurts you so much and hits them so hard later. Because when they finally see it, they have to swallow the reality that they were deeply loved in a way most people never get. And they showed up half present. They sat in the warmth of your devotion and never learned how to make a fire of their own. So when the cold comes, they don't just miss your body next to them. They miss the light you kept shining on a version of them they didn't have the courage to grow into while they had the chance. There is a moment in this entire story where the ground shifts. Not because you changed your number or screamed your final goodbye, but because you quietly stopped being a guarantee and became a question mark. And that single shift wakes up parts of the avoidant that have been sleeping their whole life. For the longest time, you were emotionally predictable. They knew that if they went quiet long enough, your anxiety would push you to reach out. They knew that if they pulled away, you would lean in harder. They knew that if they sent even the smallest breadcrumb, you would turn it into a 3-course meal of conversation, reassurance, and effort. You were constant, reliable, almost like emotional gravity in their world, and their ego built itself around that certainty. No matter what I do, they won't really leave. They may get mad, they may cry, but they always come back. That certainty made it easy for them to avoid depth, because why risk being fully vulnerable when they already felt wanted and pursued without doing the hard work of showing up consistently? Your love was like a subscription they never believed would expire. They never thought about renewal, they just assumed it would auto-renew forever. When you begin to change, when your nervous system has had enough and something inside you says, "I can't live like this anymore," you don't suddenly become cold or cruel. You simply stop moving the way you used to. Instead of immediately replying, you take your time, not to play games, but because your world is no longer on pause waiting for them. Instead of sending a long essay when they hurt you, you pull your energy back and let the distance say what your mouth is tired of repeating. Instead of jumping at the first breadcrumb, you look at it and ask yourself, is this enough for me? Or is this the same pattern with a new bow? And that internal pause, that refusal to automatically react, is what makes you feel uncertain to them. You're not trying to make them jealous. You're not trying to manipulate anything. You're just finally directing your love, attention, and focus somewhere that isn't completely dependent on how they treat you. And because they built an entire identity on your predictability, the moment that predictability dies, their ego and attachment wounds wake up like they've been slapped. Ego says, "How dare they not respond like before? Don't they know who I am? Don't they remember how much they like me? How could they just go quiet like this?" Attachment wounds whisper something deeper and more terrifying. Wait, maybe I'm actually losing them. Maybe this isn't a phase. Maybe I pushed too far. Maybe they've realized they deserve better. And together, these two forces create a storm inside them that they don't know how to name. They start obsessively checking if you've seen their message, revisiting conversations, staring at your status, trying to decode your silence the way you used to decode theirs, because their nervous system is no longer soothed by the old belief that you are an automatic yes. They are now living in the discomfort you lived in for months or years, wondering where they stand, wondering what you're feeling, wondering what you will do next. When you become uncertain instead of guaranteed, your love shifts from being something they assumed to something they might lose. And that is when the reality of your value hits them in a way it never did while they were taking you for granted. They remember the times you warned them, the nights you said, "I can't keep doing this," and they brushed it off. They remember the softness in your eyes that slowly hardened into caution, the openness in your voice that slowly turned into boundaries. And now they realize those weren't empty threats or dramatic moments. They were checkpoints on the road to exactly where you are now. Your attention was once a faucet they thought they could turn on whenever they needed a hit of validation. Now it's a well that closes itself when it's disrespected. And that confronts the part of them that believed love meant endless access without equal responsibility. They might respond by pulling you, testing you, suddenly being warm, or accusing you of changing. But under every reaction is the same truth. They feel the sting of not being sure about you. And that feeling exposes how attached they truly were, no matter how indifferent they acted. You being uncertain doesn't mean you're playing hard to get. It means you finally stepped into reality, and in that reality, your heart is not a thing they can drop and have handed back to them polished and intact. It is something they either learn to hold with both hands or risk watching disappear from their life. Not because you stopped loving, but because you finally started loving yourself more. When an avoidant suddenly comes back with big eyes, soft words, and confessions about how much they miss you, it can feel like everything you prayed for is finally happening. But this is exactly where you have to be the most awake, because their regret and desire to return are very often a cocktail of genuine feeling, fear, and ego mixed together. And that cocktail can look like love without actually being ready for healthy love. They might truly miss you. They might genuinely feel the sting of losing you. They might even be honest when they say, "I realize what I did." But missing you is an emotion, and being ready to love you well is a skill set, a level of maturity, a willingness to do uncomfortable work. Those are not the same thing. And if you confuse them, you end up back in the same cycle you barely survived last time. Think about what's happening inside them. For a long time, they enjoyed all the benefits of your presence without the responsibility of fully showing up. They had your affection, your understanding, your reassurance, your emotional availability, and they had all of that while still keeping their distance, keeping their options, keeping their walls. When you finally step away, they go through withdrawal. They feel the emptiness where your attention used to be. They feel the sharp contrast between what your love felt like and what their life feels like without it. That pain is real. Those late-night thoughts, the replaying of memories, the ache when they see your name or your photos, it's all real. But here's the crucial part. Feeling regret does not automatically mean they have developed the capacity to show up differently. It just means they don't like the consequences of who they've been. Fear is also very loud in this moment. Fear of truly losing you. Fear of being replaced. Fear of seeing you move on with someone who treats you the way they never did. Fear of having to sit with their guilt without the comfort of you continuing to love them. Sometimes the fear of feeling like the bad guy hurts more than the loss itself. So reaching out to you can be an attempt to soothe their own conscience, to get relief from that shame, to hear you say something that lets them believe they're not as harmful as their actions suggest. They may not consciously think, I'm contacting them to fix my guilt, but energetically, that's exactly what's happening. And if you rush back in, you can end up easing their discomfort while they still avoid doing any real work. Then there's ego. Ego does not like losing what it thought it could always come back to. Ego hates the idea that you might be okay without them, that you might be laughing with someone new, that you might be healing in a way that has nothing to do with them. So ego will dress up in the language of longing. I miss you. Nobody compares to you. I didn't realize what I had. Some of it may be true, but you have to look beneath the words and ask, are they trying to reconnect or just trying to reclaim their sense of importance in my life? Ego wants to know it can still get a reaction out of you, that it can still occupy space in your heart, even if it has no intention of honoring that space properly. This is why their emotional intensity can be so misleading. They might cry, they might admit things you never thought they'd admit. They might say, I know I messed up. I pushed you away. I was scared. And that honesty can hit your heart like a wave because you waited so long just to hear them speak the truth. But again, honesty in a moment of panic is not the same as sustained effort after the panic fades. You need to see not just what they feel when they're losing you, but who they choose to be when they think they have you again. Do they keep showing up? Or do they slip back into old patterns once their fear of loss calms down? Missing you is about them, their feelings, their loss, their pain, their memories. Loving you in a healthy way is about you too. Your needs, your safety, your boundaries, your reality. It means them learning to communicate even when it's uncomfortable, learning to stay present when closeness scares them, learning to repair instead of disappearing, learning to hear, this hurt me, without making you the problem for feeling hurt. It means they are willing to look at their avoidant patterns not as cute quirks, but as real relational wounds that require real effort, therapy, self-reflection, accountability. And the truth is, some avoidants will feel a tidal wave of regret and still not be ready to do any of that. They want relief. They want another chance. They want access to your heart again. But they don't want the process of becoming a safer place for that heart. So when they come back, your job is not to deny their feelings or pretend their missing you isn't real. Your job is to hold two truths at once. Yes, they might genuinely miss you, and no, that does not automatically mean it is safe to go back. Yes, they might feel sorry, and no, that does not oblige you to reopen the door. Yes, they might want you, and no, that does not guarantee they can meet you. Your growth is measured by your ability to pause between their confession and your decision, to ask, are they offering changed behavior or just heightened emotion? Are they inviting me into a new chapter or just dragging me back into an old loop? Because at the end of the day, their sudden regret is theirs to face. Your healing has taught you that you are no longer willing to sacrifice your peace just to soothe someone who only knows they love you when they feel the pain of almost losing you.